This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh, look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays, despite a minor technical error on my part there at the beginning. Either way, good morning to you all. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. Yes, we're once again into the wonderful world of border news, and wow, a lot has been going on in the last week or so. I'm going to try to cover at least the high points, such as they are, and inform both myself and you as to the chaos. I mean, just on the periphery, it has been a wild last few days. I don't even know how to describe it. Hopefully the news will help us. But before I get there, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Kiever Dam, good morning. And also, Kiever Dam, thank you so much for providing the links to the GoFundMe's top of the chat box. In particular, guys, I want to direct your attention to the first GoFundMe up there. It's a new one, and unfortunately a new one. For our friend Moonshock. Moonshock is a long time viewer and supporter of the channel. Lords of the Night, etc. Years and years. Moonshock has had a bout with cancer, not once, not twice, but now thrice, and thought he knocked it down the first two times, and he did, and it has come back. And unfortunately, he needs some help with the medical bills. So in particular, if you take a look at the first link there on the GoFundMe's, last I checked, I think we were at what, $600 of $6,000 goal. So if you have a couple of bucks to spare, please consider donating there. But as well, take a look at those for Twisted Skipster, James Colley, Grisella, and Angry Illinoisian. All of our friends in some way, shape, or form need a little bit of help. If you can donate there, please do so. If you can't, that's fine. But if you can, share those out on social media. That is very much appreciated. So thank you ahead of time for that. And thank you, Kiever Dam, for providing those links as usual. Who else is here? Noah Sencio, good morning. Old Guy Gamer, good morning. Brittany Holland, good morning. Fostonia, good morning. Jam, good morning. Lurking Gopher, good morning. Mike R, good morning to you. Sabian 187, good morning. Let's see, who else is here? Mike Savage, Blarg. K. Shull, good morning. Urkulady Stefano, good morning. Advocatus Diaboli, good morning. Mirai Vegeta, good morning. Alan Thyler, thank you so much. It's very generous of you with the Samurai #1 Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wowie, wow.
And there's a P-Dog Night Dogcat Fox. Thank you so much, Alan. Appreciate it very much. Hope you're having a good Sunday so far. You're Ridiculous Lunatic, good morning. Ostsan, good morning. Simon Willikins, good morning. TC Lachance, good morning. Captain Tripper, good morning. John Trioxin, good morning. Joyce Decker, good morning. And I think that's everybody I see. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, I hope you have a good morning. All right, so I'm going to be jumping all over the place a little bit here with the dates and things. I'm trying to keep things relatively chronological, but so much is going on, it's going to be a little all over the place. First, I wanted to start off with a level set as to the volume of illegal immigrants coming across the border in the last couple of months in particular. Is that background getting annoying? That moon background's getting annoying to me a little bit. I don't know. It's such herky-jerky. I'm going to switch it over to something static. There we go. Less distracting. So let's take a look at this first story. This is just a story out of ksat.com, the local news station somewhere. Migrant crossings along U.S.-Mexico border reach record high. CBP data shows record high again. This is not the first time. If you've been paying attention to my border news digests over the last few months in particular, yeah, we keep hitting new highs. It's amazing, isn't it? December 2023 had the most migrant encounters ever recorded, and September 2023 is second most. somehow just keeps going up. But we'll be talking about things that are affecting that shortly. The number of migrant crossings along the U.S.-Mexico border has reached a record high, according to data released Friday by Customs and Border Protection, which oversees Border Patrol. The data shows immigration officers have apprehended 302,034 migrants in December 2023. Again, that's over 300,000 migrants just in the month of December, pardon me. In Texas alone, the data shows there were 125,861 migrant apprehensions in that same time frame. The Del Rio sector saw the largest portion of those numbers, with 71,095 migrants crossing in December. That includes Eagle Pass, which has become a battleground for the state and federal government. And we'll be talking about that as well shortly. Quote, the men and women of CBP continue to enforce our nation's immigration laws, at least to the extent that the administration allows them to, at and between ports of entry, and continue to work with our Mexican partners along our shared border. CBP remains vigilant to respond to the serious challenges we are experiencing across the southwest border, unquote, said CBP Commissioner Troy Miller. Quote, CBP continues to use all available resources to ensure the safety and security of our agents and officers and the migrants who are often misled and victimized by the transnational criminal organizations. Not to mention misled and victimized by the propaganda from certain political aspects of our own country, but we'll get to that too. But as we have repeatedly said, CBP and our federal partners need additional support from Congress so that we can continue to effectuate consequences for those who do not use established lawful pathways, unquote. Yeah, both Congress and the presidency. Again, we'll get to there. KSAT got a copy of a letter the Department of Homeland Security sent to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton this week, demanding the state allow Border Patrol agents access to Shelby Park. Quote, to our knowledge, Texas has only permitted access to Shelby Park by allowing public entry for a memorial, the media, and use of the golf course adjacent to Shelby Park, all while continuing to restrict U.S. Border Patrol access to the park, the letter read. Okay. What's with Shelby Park? Oh my gosh, these letters. I guess that's the story. All right. Now, why would Texas and the federal government be at loggerheads regarding the border and enforcement thereof? Well, let me take you down. Okay, we're going to jump over to CNN because they've done a little timeline of current or recent events that may help us here. And let me make sure I don't have any ads popping up or any other goofiness or videos or things. Okay, I think it's all right. All right, so again, this story has gone nuts in the last few days. So this is just a partial timeline of events as told by CNN. Texas seized part of the U.S.-Mexico border and blocked federal Border Patrol agents. Here's what happened next. All right, so let's go through this. Eagle Pass, Texas, has turned into the epicenter of a growing feud between Texas and federal authorities over how to tackle the migrant crisis and who has jurisdiction over that part of the U.S.-Mexico border. For crying out loud, CNN, stop it. Stop it. Can I get rid of some of this stuff? I think I can. Okay. The dispute intensified on January 10th when Texas authorities effectively blocked U.S. Border Patrol agents from a 2.5-mile area in Eagle Pass, which had seen a surge of migrant crossings. This area includes Shelby Park, a city park on the Rio Grande that is now fenced off with gates and razor wire impeding the Border Patrol's access. Okay, so Texas took it upon themselves to shore up the border, even though Texas as a state does not have the authorization to deal with border security. That's the federal government's responsibility, you would think. Moving on January 12th, after the Texas Military Department, quote, seized and secured Shelby Park, 2 children and a mother drowned in a nearby part of the Rio Grande. How nearby was it? Now, Texas and U.S. officials are accusing each other of contributing to the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. Well, here's what caused the tragedy. The mother took 2 children into the Rio Grande. What was going on our side of the border had nothing to do with that decision. And the whole idea is to try to deter people from making that risk, especially when you're dealing with children. If you're a grown adult and you want to throw yourself into the maelstrom of your own accord, you're an idiot. But okay, you take innocent children into there, you're practically a murderer. So the tragedy, oh my God. And here, for those of you that can see it, and I apologize for those of you that are just listening, there's a map here showing sort of the layout of the Rio Grande, the Eagle Pass Golf Course, Shelby Park, and where everything is located. So I'm sure we'll get into this more, but right now, in summary, and I'm putting it very simply, Texas is, it might be hyperbolic to say at war with, but at least in decided conflict with the federal government over securing the border. The federal government has done a poor job of securing the border. Texas is attempting to secure the border because Texas has a very keen interest on keeping people out, because the resources that they have to house and see to people that are flooding across the border into these places has already reached practically nothing. I mean, they have nothing left. And only now are Chicago and some of the other sanctuary cities feeling the same pain that Texas has been feeling for years. But yet the federal government over and over again just kind of slow walking, not doing what they should. I can't imagine why that might be. We'll get into it as we go. All right, so here's a timeline of the ongoing fracas at Eagle Pass. Fracas, CNN. Fracas, like it's, whenever I see that word, it just sounds like some kind of like childish argument or something. A fracas. All right, if you say so. Wednesday, January 10th, the Texas National Guard blocked the Border Patrol from placing mobile surveillance equipment inside Shelby Park, according to Robert Danley, lead field coordinator for U.S. Customs and Border Protection for the Del Rio area. Okay, well, what did the Texas National Guard or the Texas governor have to say about that? Was that their intent? Okay. Additionally, Texas stated denying the Border Patrol from accessing several miles from the border. Wait, Texas stated denying. Stated denying? Additionally, Texas stated denying the Border Patrol from accessing several miles of the border, a law enforcement source familiar with operations told CNN. I guess they just said they were denying it. Around that time, state authorities started erecting razor wire, fencing, and gates to shut off access to Shelby Park, an adjoining golf course, and an area under the port of entry bridge federal agents had been using as a waiting area for migrants. Okay, so keep in mind the razor wire and fencing stuff. That'll become important shortly. Friday, January 12th, 2 days later, at around 8 p.m. Central Time, Mexico's National Institute of Migration learned about the drowning deaths of 2 children and a woman, which occurred in the area of Shelby Park boat ramp, Danley wrote. Around 9 p.m. Central Time, a Border Patrol supervisor from Eagle Pass Station was informed of the 3 drownings. Danley said in a declaration to the U.S. Supreme Court, Mexico's National Institute of Migration also told the Border Patrol supervisor 2 other migrants were in distress on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande near the Shelby Park boat ramp, Danley said. Quote, the acting Border Patrol supervisor responded to the Shelby Park entrance gate, which was closed upon his arrival, Danley wrote. Quote, from outside of the gate, the acting Border Patrol supervisor advised 3 guardsmen from the Texas National Guard through the gate. 3 migrants drowned earlier in the evening, and 2 were in distress on the U.S. side of the river, Danley continued. Quote, the gate remained closed during the conversation, and the Texas National Guard's guardsmen advised the acting supervisory Border Patrol agent through the gate they had been ordered not to let Border Patrol in through the gate or give Border Patrol access to Shelby Park, unquote. According to Danley, the Texas National Guard member told the acting Border Patrol supervisor, quote, they had been ordered not to let Border Patrol in through the gate or give Border Patrol access to Shelby. You just said that. You just said that exact same phrase. CNN. What? Okay. The Border Patrol supervisor then asked to speak with a Texas National Guard supervisor and again relayed the information that 3 migrants had drowned earlier in the evening and 2 migrants were in distress on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. Danley said, the Guard staff sergeant allegedly said Border Patrol was not allowed in the area, quote, even in emergency situations, unquote. Instead, the staff sergeant sent Texas Guardsmen to investigate, Danley wrote. Okay. And again, nothing that was taking place on the U.S. side of the border caused the drownings. Let's just keep that in mind. On the Mexico side of the Rio Grande, a woman took 2 children into the rushing waters of the Rio Grande. Whatever was happening on the U.S. side of the border did not cause her to do that and did not cause her to drown. Saturday, January 13th, one day later, Mexico's National Institute of Migration told the Border Patrol's Del Rio Sector 7 migrants in 2 groups had tried to cross the Rio Grande the night before, Danley wrote. The first group included 5 migrants, a mother and 2 children who drowned, plus 2 migrants who were rescued by Mexico's National Institute of Migration. Quote, Mexican officials were able to recover the bodies of the drowned mother and 2 children, Danley wrote. The second group of migrants included 2 men who made it to the U.S. side of the river. These 2 men were rescued by Mexican authorities. Also, on January 13th, Texas allowed Border Patrol access to the boat ramp in the Shelby Park area, but with restrictions, such as requiring information about each Border Patrol agent entering the area and offering limited access to the agency. So, again, all of these individuals threw themselves into the Rio Grande. They are being rescued by dint of their own foolhardiness, a misadventure. I'll try to be diplomatic here. And as a result of all of this, 2 innocent children are dead. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for the mother who threw her children into the river, but all the same, 2 innocent children are dead of their own, as a result of their guardian's stupidity. What was going on the U.S. side of the border, secure or otherwise, had nothing to do with it. Monday, January 15th, a Border Patrol agent drove through an access road within the roughly 2.5-mile area, Danley wrote, but the agent was stopped and questioned by a Texas National Guard member. So, as we're seeing, a pattern is increasing here. The Texas National Guard, the state of Texas, is attempting, and has been attempting, to restrict the federal government's access to the border and dealing with it. Kind of an odd conflict. Also on January 15th, the Biden administration submitted a filing to the Supreme Court, including details of the migrant drownings on January 12th. The drownings, as well as the rescue of 2 other migrants on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande by Mexican authorities, I'm still kind of confused as to why Mexican authorities are on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande rescuing people, but okay. Quote, underscore that Texas is firm in its continued efforts to exercise complete control of the border and land, unquote, in the area, quote, and to block Border Patrol's access to the border even in emergency circumstances, the administration wrote. Exercise complete control of the border. It does not have complete control of the border and land. It is trying to shore up the holes in the security of the border that the federal government has left to rot. Complete control. Well, hey guys, maybe if the federal government was doing its job, they wouldn't even be having to attempt this. You think they're doing it for their health or something? Quote, it is impossible to say what might have happened if Border Patrol had had its former access to the area, including through surveillance trucks that assisted in monitoring the area, U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar wrote in the Supreme Court filing. So wait, if Border Patrol had been there, the mother and children would not have drowned. Is that the argument? That's the argument. If you say so. Quote, at the very least, however, Border Patrol would have had the opportunity to take any available steps to fulfill its responsibilities and assist its counterparts in the Mexican government with undertaking the rescue mission. Texas made that impossible, unquote. Prelogar urged the Supreme Court to intervene. I don't know. Does the timeline of events sound like the Border Patrol would have been able to do anything? Wednesday, January 17th. 2 days later, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security set this date as the deadline for when Texas authorities must end its blockade of Eagle Pass and allow federal agents to resume operations in the area. If Texas did not agree to comply by the end of the day, DHS said it would, quote, refer the matter to the Department of Justice for appropriate action, unquote. But Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's office doubled down, saying, quote, Texas will not surrender, unquote. Surrender. Interesting word choice going on here. In a scathing 3-page letter to the DHS General Counsel, Paxton rebutted some of the federal government's claims as false. Paxton said Border Patrol agents do indeed have access to Shelby Park to respond to medical emergencies. And on the night the 3 migrants drowned, quote, TMD, Texas Military Department, did not prevent U.S. Border Patrol from entering Shelby Park to attempt a water rescue of migrants in distress, unquote, Paxton wrote. Quote, the federal agents at the gate did not even have a boat, and they did not request entry based on any medical emergency. Medical exigency. Oy. Pardon me, poverty of my vocabulary, reading too fast. Instead, the federal agents told TMD's staff sergeant that Mexican officials had already recovered dead bodies and that the situation was under control, Paxton's letter said. Quote, Texas guardsmen nevertheless made a diligent search, only to confirm that Mexican officials had recovered the migrants' bodies downriver from the Shelby Park boat ramp and on their side of the river, unquote. Also on January 17th, Texas authorities started arresting migrants at Shelby Park and charging them with criminal trespassing, marking the state's first arrests of migrants since Texas took control of the area 1 week earlier, an official said. All right, so that was the 17th. Oh boy, 5 days later, Monday, January 22nd, the Supreme Court voted 5-4 to allow Border Patrol agents to remove razor wire set up by Texas's governor. So, Texas, the government of Texas, set up razor wire on the border to help try to prevent and mitigate illegal crossings. Now, the federal government can just cut it and get rid of it. Who's in control of the border? And why would they do so? I mean, it's there to help prevent and shore up the border. I guess we'll find out here. Texas had sued to stop Border Patrol agents from cutting the concertina wire last year, saying it illegally destroyed state property and undermined security. The Department of Homeland Security welcomed the Supreme Court order. Quote, enforcement of immigration law is a federal responsibility. Boy, it sure is. And how's that going? DHS. How's that been going? Is a federal responsibility. Rather than helping to reduce irregular migration, the state of Texas has only made it harder for frontline personnel to do their jobs and to apply consequences under the law, unquote, a DHS spokesperson said. Highest number of encounters September through December. 300,000 plus encounters, as they call them, in December. DHS, what are you doing correct? What? Quote, we can enforce our laws and administer them safely, humanely, and in an orderly way, unquote. Really? You can? All right, well, why aren't you? Every other month, it is the highest number of encounters ever. And in aggregate, we're talking about millions and millions of people since Biden took over. Up from, I mean, it's not to say that it was ever perfect, but you want to talk about the surges over and over and over again. What are you guys doing correctly? But Texas's governor said he's not backing down. Quote, this is not over. Texas's razor wire is an effective deterrent to illegal crossings Biden encourages, unquote. Texas Governor Greg Abbott posted on X. Quote, I will continue to defend Texas's constitutional authority to secure the border and prevent the Biden administration from destroying our property, unquote. Tuesday, January 23rd, 1 day later, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security sent a letter to Texas's Attorney General reiterating the federal government's demand that state authorities fully reopen the Shelby Park area to Border Patrol agents. This time, the DHS General Counsel cited the Supreme Court's ruling allowing federal authorities to cut or remove razor wire and argued it had the legal right to access disputed areas in Eagle Pass. Quote, pursuant to federal law enabling the U.S. government to condemn property rights essential to control and guard the borders of the United States, 8 U.S.C. 1103b, the department acquired permanent real estate interests in and around Eagle Pass, in 2008 to support the construction and maintenance of border barriers in and around the Shelby Park area, unquote, the DHS wrote to Paxton. 2008? Okay, well, let's see, 2008, that's 2, it's 2010, then we add on 14, so 16 years. And how many crossings have taken place in the last 4? Just asking, quote, for much of the property, the department acquired fee simple interest from the city of Eagle Pass via condemnation, as well as from private landowners, unquote. And what have you been doing in the previous 4 years up to this point? Wednesday, January 24th, a CNN team in Eagle Pass witnessed members of the Texas National Guard installing more anti-climb fencing and razor wire in the Shelby Park area. The wire has kept both migrants and Border Patrol out of the area. Well, I think the goal is the first one there. The federal government does not have immediate plans for a massive removal of the razor wire in the Eagle Pass area unless the situation changes drastically or unless there's an emergency, a law enforcement source familiar with operations told CNN. But after the Supreme Court's recent ruling, federal law enforcement will cut or remove the wire as needed to enforce immigration laws and in the case of medical emergencies, the source said. Another enforcement source told CNN Tuesday federal agents were standing ready to breach the fencing to render aid to any individual in distress or if otherwise deemed, quote, operationally necessary, unquote. Also on Wednesday, Texas's governor issued a statement accusing Biden of failing to fulfill his constitutional duty to protect the nation's borders. Well, that seems to me to be self-evident, using constitutional type language. Quote, by wasting taxpayer dollars to tear open Texas's border security infrastructure, President Biden has enticed illegal immigrants away from the 28 legal entry points along this state's southern border, bridges where nobody drowns, and into the dangerous waters of the Rio Grande, unquote, Abbott wrote. Friday, January 26th, just a couple of days ago, this is the second deadline set by the Department of Homeland Security for Texas to agree to fully reopen disputed parts of the Shelby Park area to federal Border Patrol agents. Quote, by January 26, 2024, please confirm that the state will provide U.S. Border Patrol with the access described above, DHS General Counsel Jonathan E. Mayer wrote in a letter to Paxton. Quote, if the state refuses the requested access in part but not in whole, please specify what access you intend to deny, unquote. So, back and forth, round and round. As Texas is trying to secure the border, the federal agency, CBP, is trying to do their jobs, except the way they've been trying to do their jobs has been an utter failure over and over again. Texas is getting sick of it. This has been going on for years, by the way. We've been talking about Eagle Pass and Texas running out of resources to house or deal with the illegal aliens that keep coming across the border over and over again. Deaths in the Rio Grande, they haven't stopped. We only hear about it once in a while or when it becomes, convenient for the media to mention it. But that's not even mentioning how many people have died in the desert prior to that, in the jungles prior to that, on and on and on. How many people have been just abused and taken advantage of by smugglers and then left out somewhere to die or killed on the way. It's not getting any better. And certainly the rhetoric and the actions by the federal government over the last 4 years in particular, and in the presidential campaign of 2020, didn't help anything and haven't been helping anything. But we'll get on to that more so in a moment. First, over to the chat. Keldrig, thank you so much. You mean to tell me that when the federal government won't protect the border, the state has the right and duty to do it? Absurd, preposterous. Actually, they don't. They don't have the right or the duty to do it. No, that's the federal government's responsibility. If Texas tries to do it themselves, they're violating federal law. And by the letter, it might be true, but there's a level of pragmatism here that apparently doesn't seem to dawn on the federal authorities. If you're not doing your job, and you're demonstrably not doing your job, then somebody's got to do something, because Texas is still a sovereign state and has its own sovereign concerns and rights. This clashes with the federal government because of the border. So, I don't think it's been a matter of the state of Texas not trying to work with CBP over the last several years to make things better, but they haven't, as demonstrated by the record number of crossings and encounters that took place in December. And that was after September, which was the worst at that point. No. Anyway, let's move on a little bit. We already kind of covered that story there in the rundown. All right, so let's take a look at this. We're moving on to, so the Supreme Court says the federal agency, CBP, Border Patrol, they can and are allowed to cut and remove razor wire put up by the state of Texas in an attempt to try to deter illegal crossings. Well, and I'm sure there'll be a pop-up here in a second. Of course there is. Fight over border intensifies. And this is from Friday, January 26th as well, that same deadline that CNN talked about. Fight over border intensifies as Texas governor pledges more razor wire. The fight between Texas and the federal government over the control of the U.S.-Mexico border has further intensified after State Governor Greg Abbott announced he will defy the Biden administration and U.S. Supreme Court by ordering the installation of even more razor wire to deter migration. You mean illegal migration? Okay. On Monday, the Supreme Court voted 5-4 in favor of the federal government's power to remove the controversial concertina wire installed along stretches of the border in Texas at Abbott's direction. Despite this, Abbott, a hard-right Republican, is intensifying his plans to try to fence off parts of the U.S. border with Mexico. Heaven forfend. Federal agents were given further confirmation this week at the Supreme Court that they may remove the razor wire as the enforcement of immigration laws under federal jurisdiction. But Abbott has argued there is nothing preventing him from ordering the Texas National Guard to continue laying more razor wire down. The National Guard is ultimately part of the U.S. military, overseen by the U.S. president as commander-in-chief, but except in specific situations where the president explicitly takes federal control, the National Guard in each state takes orders from its state governor. Yeah, so the question is, will Biden try to extend his authority over the Texas National Guard and basically federalize them for the sake of the border and then tell them to stop reinforcing the border? He can do that. He hasn't done it yet. Immigration matters, as confirmed in the 2012 Supreme Court case Arizona v. United States, officially fall under the federal government, not individual states. Abbott has repeatedly invoked the invasion clause, essentially as a loophole in the U.S. and Texas constitutions, likening migrants to a public foreign enemy, which gives him the right to enforce border security and immigration matters, he argues. Well, for all intents and purposes, I have a hard time disagreeing with him. They may not constitute an organized military force, but the effects on the state and its fortunes and its security are not all that much different, are they? Fatma Maroof, a law professor and the director of the Immigration Rights Clinic at Texas A&M University's School of Law, said Abbott's decision to lay more wire down, quote, seems to defy the purpose of the Supreme Court's order, unquote. Well, duh. Thanks for that. Maroof said the Supreme Court ruled in favor of, quote, the federal government to continue its control of the border area. Well, that presumes it has any control to begin with. Again, record number of encounters in December 2023. They don't have control of the border. But we'll get to some changes that might be taking place shortly. Quote, the briefing really focused on the need for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers to access the bank of the river to save migrants. Is that what it is, to save migrants? There were reports of people being caught in the wire and dying. Oh, there were reports of this. Any proof of that? Because it sounds like all we're talking about is people drowning in the river before they even get to the other side. So to continue laying the wire really undermines the purpose of the injunction, unquote. I wonder if she's referring to those photographs that went out a couple of months ago that showed people climbing through the interior of a coil of concertina wire. If you've seen these photos, you might know what I'm talking about. They're the most staged-looking things you could possibly imagine. And you see these adults, and I use the term loosely, placing a child in the middle of razor wire to take a photo for propaganda purposes. Not winning any points with me, let's say. But I don't know if that's what she's referring to, but I don't know what reports she's talking about, and I'm not sure that they ever expand on that. So anyway, in Abbott's statement released on Wednesday announcing his plans to continue going around the federal government amid legal challenges, he accused Biden, the Democratic president, of using taxpayer dollars to, quote, tear open the border, unquote. Well, Technically. Quote, the federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce those laws and has even violated them, unquote, Abbott said. Well, both regarding the border and the First Amendment, which is something that people don't talk about lately for some reason, which should be a much bigger story than it was at the time. But moving on. Quote, the result is that he has smashed records for illegal immigration, unquote. By consequence, yeah. Civil rights organizations such as the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, condemn the use of razor wire and other deterrents, such as a floating barrier of buoys with nets and barbed wire in the Rio Grande as, quote, inhumane, unquote. You know what's inhumane? Dragging screaming innocent children into the rushing waters of the Rio Grande and gambling that you'll make it across safely. I don't know what's more inhumane. I'm fine with barriers that are going to deter and mitigate people from making the decision to try to drag screaming children to their deaths. I don't know what to tell you. In response to the Supreme Court's ruling, LULAC National President Domingo Garcia said, quote, LULAC today supports the Supreme Court ruling that only the federal government has jurisdiction over all border and immigration issues. Texas Governor Abbott's political stunts are costing millions of taxpayers' dollars and accomplishing nothing to solve the humanitarian crisis at the border. Oh, is it the taxpayer dollars that you're worried about? You think the federal government's been using taxpayer dollars well, huh? Oh, okay. Quote, not to mention the human tragedy of deaths on barbed wire walls of innocent women and children, unquote. Where are the deaths on barbed wire walls? I keep hearing about this. Where are the deaths on barbed wire walls? Where are the bodies hanging from razor wire? If that was a thing, we'd see the pictures of that by now, wouldn't we? And as he says that, what is the immediate follow-up to that statement? Not to mention the human tragedy of deaths on barbed wire walls of innocent women and children, unquote. And we move then to earlier this month, a mother and her 2 children from Mexico drowned in the river near Eagle Pass, a section of the border where state officials physically blocked federal agents from accessing part of the banks of the Rio Grande. Drowned and dying on walls of barbed wire are 2 different things, aren't they? Their deaths prompted a fierce response from U.S. Homeland Security spokesperson Luis Miranda, who said, quote, the state of Texas should stop interfering with U.S. Border Patrol's enforcement of U.S. law, unquote. So the Texas National Guard stopped CBP, who were there with rescue boats, going all Baywatch style with their floating devices, running towards the river to save these drowning children. Is that what was going on? You're not saying that that's what happened. Why aren't you saying that's what happened? The use of razor wire is part of Abbott's publicly funded Operation Lone Star program, where you jam the frequency in its raspberry. Lone Star. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. A joint effort between the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas Military Department that began in 2021 to curb irregular migration. It coincided with more people crossing into the U.S. because they were unable to claim asylum at an official crossing point or by appointment. Right, so instead of following the rules, they just broke the law. I'm unable to claim asylum. No, you're not unable to claim asylum. You just have to wait your turn. Meanwhile, tense talks continue in Washington over legislation to tighten border restrictions, and we'll get to that shortly as well. Maroof said Texas's move is also very concerning because of its implications on the right to seek asylum. Quote, we have in our immigration laws guaranteed a right to seek asylum for people fleeing persecution, and laying down barbed wire is the opposite of what we're meant to do, she said. No, laying down barbed wire is to prevent illegal immigration. You have a right to seek asylum at a port of entry and through established legal means. Laying down concertina wire in places where people are not allowed to enter the country does not violate that idea. What are you talking about? And still, where are the deaths on walls of concertina wire? You bring up people drowning in the river. who threw themselves and their children into the maelstrom of their own accord, never touching razor wire. See all the stuff that's said and also not said at the same time. Anyway, now let's talk about the legislation. This border reform legislation that is supposedly going to solve all the problems, and that it being is all caught up right now in legal turmoil in the Congress. Before I get to that and go to the chat real quick, let's see. Anything anybody wants to say? A Scanner Daffley. Humanitarian crisis created entirely by DNC policies that make coming here so attractive. Maybe stop feeding, housing, and giving everyone who makes it across the border a phone. Well, not only that, but also the sanctuary cities who, prior to them realizing what a problem it would be, opening their arms and saying, we want more migrants. We welcome more migrants. You saw these statements from the mayor of New York City, the governor of New York, Chicago, and elsewise, before people took them up on their offer. And then, as they saw the crisis increasing, they then tried to make things even more attractive for people by trying to fast track people getting work permits beyond the usual time frame that happens for people that are trying to get work permits in such situations, just attracting more people and giving them housing and at luxury hotels, buying out hotels and everything else, trying to do anything they could to try to meet not only their previous laws, like in New York, where they say, if you show up, we have to give you housing. But not to mention only that, but again, if you go back to the 2020 rhetoric on the campaign trail by the Biden administration, and as well as nearly all the other Democrats running for the office at the time leading up to it, they were all pro opening the border. They were all pro saying everything Donald Trump was doing at the border was bad and it was racist and xenophobic and so on and so forth. And now, I don't know, the chickens have come home to roost. And look at what we've got. One of the 50 states practically at war, a cold war with the federal government over something that both should be on the same page on, and that is securing the border. But you keep having this double talk, right? Oh, we can't have concertina wire. Everybody dying on the concertina wire. By the way, have I told you about the people who have drowned in the river on the way to trying to get to the concertina wire? Anyway, this is all caught up in some legislation that is stuck in the Congress for various reasons. We'll talk about that now. So this statement was posted by the president. This is from the office of the President of the United States as of Friday. For immediate release, statement of President Biden on the bipartisan Senate border security negotiations. January 26, 2024. For too long, we all know the border's been broken. And what did you say about that during your campaign for president? Really? Because during your campaign, you seemed to say that there was no problem, that Trump was blowing it out of proportion, that there was no crisis, that he was just being xenophobic and dictatorial and racist. Oh, but for too long, we all know the border's been broken. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you're admitting that. It's long past time to fix it. Well, you've had better part of 4 years, Joe. Now, you said you would not build another foot of wall during your campaign. And now you're directing, or at least are suing to have the ability to remove barriers to illegal entry. Okay. That's why 2 months ago, I instructed my team to begin negotiations with a bipartisan group of senators to seriously and finally address the border crisis. Well, Joe, I got an idea for you. I got a question for you. All right. Are the laws that already exist regarding federal power and illegal immigration, are they already being enforced correctly and fully? Yes or no? Now, before we start talking about new legislation, let's take a look at what already exists and ask the question, Are you enforcing those laws as written fully and effectively? If the answer is no, maybe we should start with what we're already have in place before worrying about adding things on or stalling. This is, to my mind, just one more stalling tactic. One more opportunity to try to lay the blame on somebody else for what's going on. Oh, I can't act until we have immigration reform. Well, reform only makes sense if the existing laws are either, as they are enforced and correctly enforced, aren't enough. But I got to ask, aren't they? Because when Trump was in office and he was cracking down on deportations, when he was not so. This is something that I covered in my for several years, actually, on my playlist, Expatriate Games on my channel, if you haven't seen it. Story after story after story of individuals, just as examples, who had been in the country illegally for years and years and years and years. And they were known to immigration officials. But the Obama administration had basically just sort of hand waved them. Well, as long as you check in every 6 months, it's fine, whatever else. And then Trump comes into office and suddenly says, no, your application for asylum was rejected 10 years ago. I don't care if Obama gave you a pass all this time with regular check-ins. I'm going to enforce the deportation order. The laws as existed. Whereas Obama gave lots and lots of people a waiver. And suddenly that was a problem. And then Joe Biden comes into office and says, oh, no, I'm not going to be that tough. No, you're picking and choosing what laws to enforce and how well to enforce them. That was your choice when you came into office. That was your rhetoric before you came into office. So take responsibility for the job that you campaigned for first, before trying to say, oh, if only Congress would pass reform. Anyway, that's why 2 months ago I instructed my team to begin negotiations with a bipartisan group of senators to seriously and finally address the border crisis. What crisis, Joe? There's no crisis. For weeks now, that's what they've done, working around the clock through the holidays and over weekends. Oh, poor them doing their jobs. Let's be clear. Okay, Joe, let's be clear. What's been negotiated would, if passed into law, be the toughest and fairest set of reforms to secure the border we've ever had in our country. Really? Really? Again, how are our existing laws deficient? And not deficient as far as enforcement. I'm talking about deficient as though they were being enforced fully. I'm only partially being facetious there. I'm not a legal expert, but you got to tell me, between what Trump had access to when he was president versus what Biden had access to when he became president, they had access to the same powers. And suddenly the numbers spiked under Biden. It would give me, as president, a new emergency authority to shut down the border when it becomes overwhelmed. Does such an authority not already exist? Because Texas has an invasion loophole that it's using. Does the federal government have lesser power than Texas to enforce the border? And if given that authority, I would use it the day I signed the bill into law. Oh, so you'd be even more isolationist, xenophobic, and racist than Trump? Oh, okay. Further, Congress needs to finally provide the funding I requested in October to secure the border. Oh, the funding you need to secure the border. So you just need more money. Well, Texas is paying for a bunch of razor wire. You might okay, never mind. This includes an additional 1,300 Border Patrol agents, 375 immigration judges, 1,600 asylum officers, and over 100 cutting-edge inspection machines, to help detect and stop fentanyl at our southwest border. Securing the border through these negotiations is a win for America. For everyone who is demanding tougher border control, this is the way to do it. If you're serious about the border crisis, pass a bipartisan bill and I will sign it. Joe, if you were serious about the border crisis, you wouldn't have downplayed its severity or its importance these last 4 years. And I'm including the campaign leading up to his election. But you did, and you put out such rhetoric and signals to the world that you weren't going to enforce the laws the way Trump did. And what happened? What has happened? And now you're fighting Texas to secure illegal points of entry. Oh, boy. So let's go a little bit deeper into this story with an article I think that was published just last night. Biden offers fresh assurance he would shut down border right now if Congress sends him a deal. Yeah, but what is contingent in that deal? Does it have anything to do with Ukrainian funding? He didn't mention that, did he? Here we go. Columbia, South Carolina, bidding to salvage a border deal in Congress that would also unlock money for Ukraine. Yeah, they didn't mention that in your press release, did you, Joe? President Joe Biden offered fresh assurances Saturday night that he would be willing to close the U.S.-Mexico border if lawmakers would only send him a bill to sign. Joe, you can close the border, but people are still going to attempt to get into the country illegally. How are you going to address that? What do you mean by closing the border? I mean, all ports of entry just shut down? I'd love to know what that means. How is "quote unquote" closing the border going to happen? I don't know what that means. Sorry, AP, go away. Biden also eager to disarm GOP criticism of his handling of migration at the border, which is difficult to do since wasn't it Kamala Harris's job to find out the root causes of the immigration crisis? And what was her big strategy? Oh yeah, not visit the border in her first 6 months in office. And then when she finally did say something of note, she went down to, what was it, Ecuador or Venezuela or something, and got on a podium and said, "Do not come." Biden said at a political event in South Carolina that he would shut down the border, "quote unquote," right now if Congress passed the proposed deal. The framework hasn't been formally agreed to by Senate Democrats and Republicans and would face an uncertain future in the GOP-controlled House. Quote, "A bipartisan bill would be good for America and help fix our broken immigration system and allow speedy access for those who deserve to be here, and Congress needs to get it done," Biden said. I'm not concerned about speedy access for those that deserve to be here. I'm concerned about people throwing themselves and innocent children into the Rio Grande to drown. I'm concerned about over 300,000 contacts and encounters at the border. And those are the only ones we know about. This is the thing. Every time they talk about, oh, the numbers have gone up. Well, that's only the numbers that we can calculate. Otherwise, who knows how many people are streaming in illegally otherwise with who knows what intentions, backgrounds, or else. It just boggles the mind. Quote, "It'll also give me, as president, the emergency authority to shut down the border until it could get back under control. If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly," unquote. Okay, I want to know, what does it mean to shut down the border? What does that mean? And fix it quickly. So a border security crisis that has been undulating in severity for years, but almost in particular in the last 4 or 5 under our current administration. You're going to fix it quickly. What have you been doing to fix it quickly over the last 4 years? You don't have the authority to shut down ports of entry? The federal government, whose edict and charge is to protect the border, who has the sovereign jurisdiction over protecting and securing the border, you don't already have the power to shut down a port of entry or all ports of entry in an emergency? What exactly was done during COVID again? Okay, all right. The deal being negotiated in Congress would require the U.S. to shutter the border if roughly 5,000 migrants cross illegally on any given day. So wait, if on Tuesday we somehow calculate that 5,000 migrants have crossed illegally, then we shut down the border. Yeah, some one-day totals last year exceeded 10,000. Yeah, so the border is going to be shut down forever given current numbers. Or is it? We'll get to that momentarily. Former President Donald Trump has been pressuring Republicans for weeks to kill the negotiations. He's loath to give a win to Biden on an issue that animated the Republicans' successful 2016 campaign and that he wants to use as he seeks to return to the White House. Well, here's the thing. And I think Trump should think about this for a second. Give Biden the opportunity to put up or shut up. Right? Take away his excuses. Like, okay, Biden, here's your authority. Shut down the border, fix the problem quickly, and hold him to it. He's got the better part of a year. Hold him to it. If those numbers don't drop significantly, well then. But there's a side thing we have to keep in mind. I'll get to that again. I keep promising this. There's a story that I just saw yesterday that makes me wonder if something's up. Thank you. Holy cats, Fostonia. Thank you so much. Hi, Scribe. I'm old enough to remember when Biden opened his acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention that he was running because Trump is a racist and build a wall was proof. So closing now down the border is what exactly? Well, it's an admission of reality is what it is. One that he didn't want to have to make. And then everybody knew. Anybody who was thinking about it for 3 seconds and watched the numbers over the last couple of years and just listen to the rhetoric. This is the thing. What these guys, anybody who's advocating for open borders or, we need to welcome all migrants, this, that, and the other, they don't seem to realize the consequences of their action. Only now maybe are some of the bigger cities realizing this, as their sanctuary city declarations and virtue signaling of the past is becoming a frightening reality of consequence. But every time that they said that, every time that they gave any kind of propaganda to the idea that we have an open border or that we have a safe landing zone for anybody and everybody who's got a gripe elsewhere in the world, they are contributing to the deaths of people. Okay. And I'm not even talking about the already proven and further deaths that will occur from criminals coming from other countries and preying upon citizens of the United States. But in addition, when they say things like that, it's used as propaganda, not only in the minds of the desperate out there, but also from criminals who use it to convince people that all they have to do is get across the line and they'll be safe and have a job and have a life and so on and so forth for them and their children going on in the future. Everybody who's virtue signaling over here for the last 5-6 years in particular has been inviting needless death. Okay, the mom and the 2 children that drowned in the Rio Grande, that's just the latest example of desperate people being convinced that all they have to do is get across the line and everything will be solved for them. Everything will be taken care of for them. They will be given jobs and housing and so on and so forth. Those 2 children are dead as a result of all of the idiots up here standing on virtue in defiance of Orange Man bad. It's disgusting. It's been disgusting for the years that I've been covering it myself in my own little way. It doesn't stop. And it is ridiculous that the only time that it suddenly dawns on people that this is a problem is when it finally hit home in the northern states. All right. They could no longer just sort of like laugh at Texas and Arizona and New Mexico for complaining about this and being racist and xenophobic and so on. Oh, hey, New York. Hey, Chicago. Hey, Denver. How's that working out for you? A massive amount of desperate people flooding the borders of your city, your town, your state. It's not some localized political problem. It is a total American problem. It's stupid it had to come to this crisis point for people to realize that. And Biden going back on his word like this, I mean, you would think that now Biden's the racist and the xenophobe and so on. I'm not quite sure what the proponents for open borders and everything are going to do with themselves now. Because if Trump comes in saying secure the border, what are they going to say? He's a racist and a xenophobe? Of course they will. Of course, because his policies are less humane or something. Oy. Let's see. In a written statement on Friday evening, Biden said the deal would allow him, quote, a new emergency authority to close the border. He added, and if given that authority, I would use it. And the day I signed the bill into law. It was a stark claim from a Democratic president that was met with astonishment and shock from immigration advocates who have said his policies do not reflect the progressive approach they had expected. Well, tell me and tell me true, how has that progressive approach worked out these last 4 years? As if anybody with a thinking brain needed to know or needed to spend any time gaming out what was going to happen when Biden took office. How's that worked out? Record number of illegal migrations, increased deaths both in the Rio Grande and God knows in how many places in the areas prior to even reaching the U.S. border. How many people have been trafficked? How many people have been murdered? How many, let's just say for the sake of YouTube's algorithm, atrocities have been enacted upon people as a result of all this? And who knows, just who knows, how many threats are awaiting us that have already crossed into the border? Criminals, people with other ill intentions, and so on. Quote, voters want to see our elected leaders do the hard work to fix our frayed immigration system, said Deidre Schiffling, Chief Political and Advocacy Officer at the American Civil Liberties Union. Oh, our frayed immigration system. Again, I have to ask, how effectively has our immigration system been enforced these last 4 years in particular with these progressive approaches? Quote, President Biden and Congress must abandon these proposals and heed voters' demands for fair and effective immigration policies that manage the border and treat people seeking safety with dignity. What are you talking about? You've had that. You've had Biden attempting to do that for the last 4 years. And this is where we're at. I'd like to see Deidre Schiffling go talk to the mayor of New York right now. I'd like to see Deidre Schiffling go talk to the mayor of Chicago right now. Okay? And in fact, I'd like to see Deidre Schiffling go and talk to the mayor of Eagle Pass right now. Biden has had the better part of his entire presidency to be the progressive approach on immigration that you're demanding. How has that worked out? But Biden is struggling across multiple fronts, dealing with an influx of asylum seekers, even as he cracks down on those who cross into the U.S. illegally. Cracks down how? Like, in what way? Democrats are increasingly frustrated because asylum seekers are streaming into cities that lack the resources to care for them. Oh, but let's not talk about Eagle Pass for the last several years. It wasn't until they hit Chicago and New York that you guys gave a rip. You could care less about Republican-controlled states and cities. Oh, but as soon as it hits home, oh, now you care. In a letter Saturday responding to Biden's comments, House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican of Louisiana, insisted that Biden doesn't need congressional action to close the border, no kidding, and called on him to, quote, take executive action immediately to reverse the catastrophe he has created, unquote. Yeah, Biden is using the immigration policy, the immigration reform bill, dangling his action over quote unquote closing the border because he wants that Ukrainian money. He wants that Ukrainian sponsorship money. He could do all this right now. The federal government does not lack the power at this moment to more firmly secure the border where we can and do exactly what Texas is, putting up additional barriers and setting up additional security in places that are known to be weak points for illegal immigration. He could do that now. He's had 4 years to do that. He hasn't. He's lying. He could do that today. He doesn't need this reform package to be passed. Nonsense. It's extortion. That's all it is. Thank you, Frank Hubbard. They would first need to admit what's going on is wrong. They feel they should come as they wish. Well, yeah, admitting to reality has been a hard row to hoe for both Democrats and the Biden administration over the last 4 years. I don't know what more evidence they needed. The increased numbers, the increased amount of deaths, the increased crime. I mean, we've had more stories of like tractor trailers full of desperate people being left around to suffocate. When the smugglers get scared of CBP coming across or whatever. And this most recent example, two little kids, bunch of quote unquote adults, dragging two screaming little kids into the Rio Grande to drown. Oh, but that's the fault of barbed wire, everybody. Barbed wire caused those kids to drown. Did you know that? Barbed wire caused those kids to drown. Thank you, Frank. Immigration remains a major concern for voters in the 2024 election. An AP NORC poll earlier this month found that those voicing concerns about immigration climbed to 35% from 27% last year. Most Republicans, 55%, say the government needs to focus on immigration in 2024, while 22% of Democrats listed immigration as a priority. Well, look at the numbers. Talk to us about the number of people that have come across the border month over month in the last year, just in 2023. That's up from 45% and 14% respectively in December of 2022. Arrests for illegal border crossings from Mexico reached an all-time high in December since monthly numbers have been released. The Border Patrol tallied 249,785 arrests on the Mexican border in December, up 31% from 191,112 in November, and up 13% from 222,018 in December of 2022, the previous all-time high. Well, I thought September of 2023 was the previous all-time high. Maybe the numbers are different at AP. Mexicans accounted for 56,236 arrests in December, while Venezuelans were second, with 46,937, erasing much of the decline that followed the start of deportation flights to Venezuela in October. Arrests of Guatemalans surged, with Hondurans and Colombians rounding out the top 5 nationalities. Oh, but there are others. Now, there is something to pay attention to in all of this. As Biden starts talking about, I will close the border if this legislation is signed into law. So I'm going to end on this little story that I saw that makes me curious about what might be coming down the pike, or what might be going on behind closed doors, let's say. Now, this is just one story. This is one town. But let's go over it. This is from January 27th, so just yesterday. A California community sees a dip in immigration. You mean illegal immigration. They're so averse to calling it what it is. Where have all the people gone? Let's find out. Now go away. A little over a month ago, the small California community of Jacumba, I'm guessing, on the U.S.-Mexico border was a scene of chaos. Hundreds, sometimes as many as 1,000 migrants, including children, were stuck in open-air camps for hours and even days on end to await processing by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They had little access to food, water, shelter, or even bathrooms. Local townspeople told NPR they felt overwhelmed. Quote, "We're seeing seizures, diabetic emergencies, broken bones, burns, lots of burns," unquote, said local resident and volunteer Karen Parker. Just a few weeks later, the situation in Jacumba has changed dramatically. The camp is still there, and those inside are no less desperate, but the numbers are down sharply, and local residents say that is just part of the story. When NPR returned to Jacumba earlier this month following an investigation last year into unofficial migrant detention camps, it was much colder. In one of the camps, a few feet away from the U.S.-Mexico border wall, amidst piles of trash, several dozen families, including small children, huddled around crackling makeshift bonfires. Kurdish, Mexican, Bangladeshi, Colombian, and Dominican families, say that again, Kurdish, Bangladeshi, families spoke about how they had crossed the border a few hours earlier and were waiting to be taken by border agents for processing. As she tried to warm by the fire, a woman named Ellie sobbed while remembering her son, who she said was killed recently by a drug cartel in Zacatecas. I apologize. Mexico, where she's from. She fled with 6 family members. They asked that we withhold their last name for fear of retaliation. Quote, all we want is to stay together and stay alive, Ellie said. At sunrise, Border Patrol arrived. An agent instructed everyone to put out their bonfires, and a bus took everyone for processing. Once they left, the camp was deserted, just piles of trash, empty makeshift tents, and some smoldering fires. CBP declined to address specific questions about the Jacumba camp, but following NPR's investigation in November, the agency provided a statement saying that its officers, quote, and agents prioritize the health and safety of all those they encounter, unquote. Locals say the decrease in border crossings and people being held at the camps started around early January and came practically overnight. Pardon me one second. I need to wet my proverbial whistle. Up until a week ago, we were having people dropped off in the camps all during the day and night, said volunteer and local resident Sam Schultz. Quote, at this point, the numbers are just 10% of what they were before, unquote. What Schultz described has happened along the border. What Schultz described has happened along the border. A spike in unauthorized crossings in December followed, government sources say, by a dip in January. Well, now, why is that? Is it because of the weather? Because it's cold, maybe? U.S. officials have told NPR that the dip is related to a series of meetings in late December between the Mexican government and White House officials regarding immigration enforcement. Nothing official was announced following the meetings. I want to underscore that. Nothing official was announced following the meetings. In fact, Mexican President Andres Manuel López Obrador publicly criticized U.S. immigration policy after the meetings, saying that only addressing the root causes of migration, poverty, violence, and repression, can work. But official sources have told NPR that the Mexican National Guard is ramping up its enforcement. Suddenly, you can see them from Jacumba on the other side of the border fence. Quote, I've seen them now very often, said Schultz. Quote, I've seen them actually arresting people on the side and taking them away. Yeah, they're there, unquote. It would hardly be the first time that Mexico has increased immigration enforcement following pressure from the U.S. It was a strategy during both the Trump and Obama administrations. But advocates say historically, it's a strategy that simply pushes desperate people to cross through more dangerous routes. The day after visiting the camps in Jacumba, NPR headed west to Otay, a 3,500-foot mountain that separates Mexico from San Diego. We were tagging along with a group called the Borderlands Relief Collective, a humanitarian group that leaves water and first aid for migrants. Great. The landscape in Otay is distinctly different from Jacumba. Quote, it's an arduous, dangerous trek, explained volunteer Joseph Hauser. Quote, where we're going to go is a path typically taken by people who are not looking to be found, unquote. Hauser has been doing this work for about a year, but said, quote, I've only really started running into people when we come out here in the last month and a half, unquote. It was still dark out when we started driving up the mountain, but we barely made it a few miles before being intercepted by 2 women and a toddler. They were from Nigeria and Guinea and had been hiking for about 5 hours. The mother was sobbing. Her feet were starting to give out. The 3-year-old was quiet. It was freezing, and the aid workers worried the 3 of them might be in danger of hypothermia. As aid workers wrapped her in an emergency thermal blanket and gave her fluids, another family came down the mountain. They were from Ecuador and had a 6-year-old. They too had crossed overnight. Edwin didn't want to provide his last name because his family was crossing without papers, if you can believe it. Look, he said, quote, I'm scared. I'm scared that if I get caught, who will take care of them, unquote. Oh, I don't know. Maybe you, the parent? He said throughout his journey up north through Mexico, there were forces from the Mexican National Guard. He said they just wanted bribes. Edwin said he was warned about the rough terrain that he and his family would have to endure, but he felt an urgency to attempt the journey anyway. Quote, we kept hearing about how hard the border is getting. You could get deported. Too many people. So we did this instead and turned ourselves over to the will of God, unquote, he said. After volunteers tended to the migrants, we continued up the Otay Mountain. The terrain got steeper and more slippery. About an hour later, in a crevice on the side of the mountain, there was an altar. It was filled with candles, rosaries, a Bible, money, offerings in foreign coinage, and images of Saint Toribio Romo, patron saint of migrants. One of the images contained this text, quote, "Protect my family now that I have had to leave them behind. Allow me to come back home soon." Okay, now, for the sake of any questions elsewise, I am now going to delve into the realm of speculation. Is this a conspiracy theory? Yes. Does that make it illegitimate, gaming out what I've just read? No. But here we go. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that there were conversations behind closed doors between the White House and the Mexican government that said, hey, we need to get our numbers down on recorded contacts at the border in order that I have the opportunity to become president again. I need to show that what I'm doing has had a positive effect on the border numbers. So, if you guys will ramp up your enforcement at the most visible locations and try to drive the illegal immigrants either away from coming across the border or to far more dangerous and less hospitable routes in the foreseeable future, when I become president again, I'll make sure that you get XYZ, PDQ, whatever, quid pro quo. But we can't say that that's what you're doing publicly or that we told you to do it, because that would then sort of undermine the idea that it was my domestic policies on our side of the border that was causing these reductions. So you do that, and we'll just hope that people either get scared off from trying to cross the border, or they put themselves into far more harmful ways to try to get to the border, so that either they won't make it or they won't be easily seen making it if they do. Now, is that a cynical idea on my part? Is that a completely inhuman and cynical way of thinking about this? Yes. Would I put it past anybody to try that as a short-term fix to adjust the numbers and try to point to some successes at the border in the short term and during the election? Yes. Now, again, this is just one story from NPR talking about one community and some rumors in the background. Not exactly a big headline story, but as soon as I read that bit, I was like, the Mexican government just decided to increase border enforcement of their, out of their goodwill? The Mexican government. I don't know, guys. I don't know. It's going to be a much more raucous and crazy, well, not only campaign, but the next year in particular, and when it comes to the border, is going to be something else. And the situation with Texas is still ongoing. I don't know how that's going to pan out, but it is amazing that the state of Texas is effectively at Cold War with the federal government over securing the border. That the president of the United States is, I guess unsurprisingly, lying about the extent and expanse of his current powers over the border in trying to influence people to sign over new legislation that just happens to have further Ukrainian funding tied to it. I'm sure that's not his primary motivation. On and on and on and on. So there you go. There's lots going on. More will be going on. I might, depending on how things pan out this next week with the legislation, I might do a midweek stream talking about it as it happens. I'm going to keep an eye on this because this is just, maybe things are reaching a sort of plateau as far as the crisis nature of the conflict between Texas and the federal government, but maybe not. The legislation in Congress right now to quote unquote secure the border is iffy at best if it'll pass, especially with the Ukraine funds tied to it. And as mentioned, that Republicans, Trump in particular, don't want to give Biden the opportunity to call a win on immigration. Of course, how that win would be achieved, again, this story, I'm not saying that this is the end all be all, but this one story, this little sidewise piece of information about sudden increased immigration enforcement on the Mexico side of the border after meetings with the White House where nothing official was announced. And the president made sure to come out and say, oh, no, Biden is not working with us or something else. All feels a little possibly manipulative, little backroom dealings kind of stuff. I'll take a minute here for anything you guys want to say, and then I will wrap up for the time being. Osan, Scribe Light. Apparently, the feds are letting Texas put down barbed wire as of Friday. Yeah, they have the authority to remove it. They haven't done it quite yet, or at least not to an extent that's been publicized all that much. Because then you're going to have the Texas National Guard and Texas authorities coming into direct conflict with the federal government trying to destroy Texas state property. Right? Yeah, we're at. This is some weird territory. Weird territory. Faithless. It will not be a civil war, as the left are not really Americans. They hate America and are just trying to destroy it. They may have been born here, but they are insurgents at heart. I'd say that the thinking on the progressive side of things is very short-sighted. It's reactionary. It's social media generated. It's buzzwords and headlines and not thinking about the big picture. Just thinking about the pragmatic realities of what it is that they're asking for. And like I say, and has been said now for a couple of months, reality is starting to dawn on those who would just be their hashtag activists and sitting in their Starbucks with their iPhones when the problem comes home. In New York and Chicago and Denver and other places, it's suddenly becoming apparent what the southern states have had to deal with for years and years and years now. And they're breaking so fast. Just listen to or look up some stories on the mayor of Chicago, mayor of New York, their rhetoric on the situation, who they're blaming for it. But still, even now, even with the reality dawning on them, they're having a hard time admitting that their own policies, their own sanctuary policies and elsewise, invited this problem to their doorstep. And they can try to stand on their moral declarations of welcoming and we don't deny anybody. We're not racist. We're not xenophobic until it comes home. But that's only happening in some cities and not as bad in others. So what else we got? CC Karaoke, deliver aid in the form of more barbed wire. Well, again, if the federal government had been doing their jobs these last 4 years, I mean, by all rights, Biden should have continued the wall project. But we can't do that. We can't say that Donald Trump had a point. We can't say that the Republicans have had a point on immigration. That's just basic math, basic physics. No. We have to stand on some kind of moral authority of it. Like securing our borders is a terrible thing. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's never made any sense. It's been so stupid and self-destructive. But yeah. So Texas using concertina wire and floating buoys to try to deter illegal immigration, securing the border in places where security is weak or can't be easily enforced. That's bad. Oh, but if you pass this legislation, I'll close the border. And what would that look like, Mr. President? How would that be any different if you actually meant what you said by what Texas is attempting to do? Shoring up those places and trying to deter people from killing themselves and children. Let's see. Rib Rascal. Trump never delivered his big, beautiful wall. He never talks about one now, even. Well, it wasn't easy, and he wasn't given a whole lot of options otherwise. And his claim, oh, Mexico will pay for the wall. And I was like, oh, boy. Yeah. Well, everybody was fighting against each other on how to implement that. But I'm waiting. I'm waiting for, because it's got to be coming. It's got to be coming. I can't wait to see the hypocrisy that's inevitable of Democrats calling for more barriers. They might not say the wall. That phrase alone might not quite cross their lips, but asking or demanding more security at the border without actually saying the phrase "build a wall." Yeah, it's already happening. It'll happen more. Let's see. Faithless again. Lots was built, but it was rhinos that yeah. So much more could have been accomplished if people had seen the reality of the situation and not turned it into, oh, there is no crisis at the border. That's just Trump propaganda. Except when you're not looking at the numbers, looking at the situation at hand. And again, I've mentioned before, I have family who have worked on the border before, and I spoke to them several years ago and heard absolute horror stories. And this is just at like a little family gathering, 45-minute to an hour chat with somebody who actually knew what was going on down there. The stuff that happens there would curl your blood if they put out in the news when it happens and as often as it happens. The drowning of the mother and the children that they're using as some kind of excuse against barbed wire. I mean, you can't get much more horribly tragic than that, but that's just one example. There's so much else going on down there that's being spurred on by and has been spurred on by the rhetoric and the loosely enforced laws and the open arms policy that has been put out there by Democrats for years, and the Biden administration in particular on their campaign trail and since then. And this is something else. I'm going to get into the upcoming election a little bit here. If you want to see how not seriously the Biden administration has treated this problem, putting Kamala Harris up front in February of 2021 as the lead on enforcing the border, finding the causes of root migration or whatever, absolutely ridiculous. And her not going to the border in the first 6 months of her term, Lester Holt asking her about it months into her term as vice president after being given that assignment, and her joking about it. As an aside, the next couple of months in particular, and going forward into the election, it's going to be very interesting to see. And I've said this in previous streams. If Biden is running for president and the Democratic National Committee and the Biden campaign in particular, if they are not putting Kamala Harris side by side and running her as much for president as Biden, then all politics aside, they are doing a grave disservice to this country, because people need to understand that if you are voting for President Biden to return to office, you are effectively voting Kamala Harris into the office of president, because the likelihood that President Biden is going to have some problem in the next 4 years, if reelected, is only increasing exponentially each day. Time, age, and the evidence we have seen of his cognitive ability, physical ability, and otherwise. Let's say his brain is completely sharp, right? Let's say his brain is completely on par. He has the body and the constitution of an octogenarian. The odds of him being able to maintain a functional capacity 4 more years is decreasing with every day. And so the Democrats have to be honest with themselves and with the voting public that Kamala Harris is running for president of the United States. If they don't treat it that way, if they don't take it seriously in that way, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not a registered anything. I didn't vote in the last 2 presidential elections. I'm likely not going to vote in the presidential election again this year. When Hillary Clinton and Trump were running for president, I didn't want either one of them in office for various reasons. Trump because he was a game show host, and Clinton because I don't like the idea of family dynasties running our highest office. This is why I didn't vote for Bush. I didn't like the idea of a few select families constantly returning to the highest office in the land. We're not supposed to be that kind of country, I thought. So the idea of a Clinton being in the House again just drives me nuts. or subsequent generations of families. If Barron Trump runs for president, I'm not going to vote for him either. It just, But in this election in particular, and the Democratic side specifically, they had better be honest with everybody about the likelihood of what Kamala Harris's role will be if Biden wins again for the next 4 years. And that should give everybody a wake-up call as to what they are voting for and what they are voting to potentially have to deal with. And her performance as vice president, her performance just in public discourse. Anyway, I could go on, but I'm starting to leave off the topic. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. My voice is starting to give out, so I'm going to call it here. A couple of things before I go. First and foremost, if you'd like to join the Discord, the Scribe Light channel Discord, well, I have a link for you into the chat right now. Click on that. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, all you have to do is provide the secret word. The secret word will tell me and my moderators that you actually watch the show and have thus earned the right, the privilege, the entitlement to become a member of the Discord server. And today's secret word is concertina. Just say, hello, concertina, and I'll know that you watch the show. A couple programming notes. As I said, depending on how the immigration thing hashes out this next week, I might do a surprise stream sometime midweek. Keep your eyes open for that on Twitter, scribe_light. Also, next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, as usual, be TED Excellence. My fingers crossed that if schedules line up, I'll have a guest on for that one, but I'm not going to make any promises I can't keep quite yet, so keep your eyes open for that. But here's the big news, big news. Next Saturday, February 3rd at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, is the next episode of Living on Borrowed Crime. But this is a special event, a first in what I hope will be a series as things proceed. I'm going to have on three true crime content creators, all to discuss a single case that all of them have covered in their researches and their video production. My guests will be Dave's Lemonade, Matt Orchard, and Stay Awake, or around here as we know him, Stave. The three of them have done videos, very lengthy researched videos on the Darrell Brooks case. This is the individual that drove a car through a Christmas parade several years ago, killing many people, and the trial. Such as it was, the chaotic trial that occurred thereafter. We're going to be talking about that case from three people who've done extensive research into it, into the true crime genre and production. That'll be next Saturday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on this channel. I'll start putting out the link for that in the next couple hours. Everybody has that available. It's already posted onto the Discord if you want to take a look and set your schedules for that. Very much looking forward to that. Long time in coming, trying to align schedules and time zones from around the world. Finally, the stars have aligned. Fingers crossed. Knock Formica next Saturday. It'll happen. But with that, everyone, I want to thank you all for joining me today. Again, if you have any thoughts on this subject, leave them in the comments below. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, either to myself or, more importantly, to the fundraisers at the top of the chat box. Again, please, in particular, take a look at the one for Moonshock, marked as Moon there on the chat. Twice cancer survivor. It has come back. He could really use some help in covering some medical bills on his third fight against cancer, hopefully the last one. But with that, everybody, I want to thank you all for joining me. Hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday and weekend as well. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.